Hi everyone, this is my very first YouTube channel, and as the title suggests, this is definitely something that I'll be learning through experience. But yeah, everyone has to start somewhere. So for now, let me just get into it. The main focus of this channel would be to teach through trial and error. A lot of the topics that I'll be covering, I already have quite a bit of experience in, and then I'll try and teach it to the best of my ability. And some of the other topics that we'll be covering, I might have forgotten how to do a few things, or I might not know how to do it at all. And then I will try and show you the trial and error process that I go through, which a lot of beginners would be wondering, okay, how do I figure out how to do that? Where did I learn this from? And things like that. Because I didn't go to college or get any, I didn't have qualifications in programming or anything. Everything I know is self-taught through YouTube tutorials and online resources. And then I'll be explaining what I go through to try and figure out how to do something that I don't know how to do, and then apply it to my projects and then making a feature or something out of it. And yeah, I think that could be a very interesting way of teaching. Some of the things I'll be teaching you, and I'll also be learning about it at the same time, so it could be a win-win for both of us. And yeah, I think it could make some new beginners or newcomers a bit more comfortable to see that some online resources don't just show you one way and it's always a successful way of doing something, and they actually show you things can go wrong, things can break, and how to get past it when it does. Because things in the programming and electronics fields are definitely not perfect. There's going to be trial and error, and there's going to be a lot of it. In fact, nowadays what I do in my company, most of the work I do is trying to fix bugs. So yeah. But yeah, anyway, the three main topics in this channel that I'll be covering will be the software development. For now, I think it's just going to be web development. You can see how it goes from there once that's done. Electrical engineering, like DIY electronics and building little smart home kits or Internet of Things modules, and maybe a little bit of an intro to robotics, like very basic robotics and things like that. And then the third one would be about 3D printing. And the reason I picked those three is because I also think the three complement each other quite well. Once you have a good understanding of the software side of things, I'll be showing you how to program electronic circuits, so integrated circuits, and boards like an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi, and how to use that to control your electronic circuits and projects and whatever other modules you might make for your home automation systems. And then using the 3D printer to make enclosures for your projects. So yeah, it covers quite a broad field. I probably won't be able to cover every single topic in all three of those fields, since there's a lot of dedicated YouTubers out there that only focus on the one field, and trying to stay ahead of how quickly software and technology is advancing is already challenging enough, focusing on just one field. But I'll be covering the broad aspect of things. So yeah, I think at the end of this YouTube channel, or after those three chapters, we'll be making some pretty interesting gadgets and programs and electronic kits, or just printing some random objects and things. Yeah, I think it could be cool. So yeah, the first chapter, which is going to be the programming side of things. I'm not getting into the electronics and 3D printing things just yet, taking it step by step. will be to give you an introduction to HTML, CSS and JavaScript. I know there's a lot of YouTubers when entering or when trying to learn about programming that always start with those three, but there's a reason for it. They are the basic and fundamental building blocks of programming. You can try and go straight into bigger programs like Python or JavaScript or C++ or just Java. But yeah, if you don't know anything and you jump right into that, there's a pretty high chance that you'll get stuck and frustrated and might actually end up just stopping the learning. You'll give up on programming because of how difficult it is, and it doesn't need to be. You just need to start from the small steps, and then everything from there just starts to fall into place. But yeah, the HTML, CSS and JavaScript. I know there's a lot of YouTubers out there that all of them basically start here when you try to learn software development from scratch, and the reason for that is it's the basic building blocks for when you get into software development. You can try and go straight into the higher up programming languages like Java and Python and C, any of the C languages, but going straight into that when you don't know anything can be really, it can be a really daunting task, and to most you'll probably get discouraged from continuing your learning process in programming because of it, of how challenging it can be. But yeah, it doesn't need to be. Just need to know where to start. Take those, even though it might sound boring or off topic, take those little steps first, and over time as you add and add and add onto that, you'll start understanding the other programming languages that would have been challenging at first a lot easier. It won't ever not be a challenge, but learning how to work with it is going to be a lot easier because you're going to have a basic understanding or a pretty good understanding of all the fundamentals and the tags and processes and if statements and loops and classes and all those things. But yeah, first I'll be teaching about HTML, showing you how to just get some content onto a web page with all its tags and headings and lists and images and things like that. Then I'll be covering CSS, on how to style those elements that you added in HTML. And then I'll be going into JavaScript, which will be covering animations and conditional statements, so that something only displays after a button is pressed or an animation gets triggered, or you can add key inputs to control something on the HTML page. Maybe make a little snake game that you can control from the keyboard, or a paint game where your mouse is the brush or something like that, where you can build it straight into the browser. Just to get just to cover the basics of variables and functions, and how to take in user interactions and turn it into some kind of feature or an event that gets triggered. So that can be a pretty fun experience. And then in the chapter 2 I'll be showing more the back-end side of things. In the beginning it might not be quite clear why there needs to be a back-end, but yeah, once you start learning about it, you'll see it opens up so much more possibilities and so many more doors, and makes your site or your project so much more dynamic once you understand the need and the reason for the back-end side of things, that the possibilities are going to be near endless. But yeah, then I'll be teaching PHP and everything that can do. or at least the basics of what that can do, and some of the more intermediate things. And then I'm going to teach you about MySQL, how to connect and work with databases so that the information on your website doesn't need to be present on load, and it actually pulls the information you need from a database so that you can make a user login system or customize something only for a specific user that logged in. If that user logs in, you'll see all that user's own details and the way they customize the page. And when another user logs in, it'll be to their preference and how they customize the page and the information that they added, which is something that you wouldn't know beforehand when trying to add all of that in an HTML. And if you did, that would be quite a mess. But yeah, then you'll just see how PHP and MySQL can make everything a lot more dynamic and keep your code clean, which is very important if you want to make a big success in programming or work for another company. Short, sweet, clean and dynamic code is always the best way to go. And then I'm actually not quite sure what you call these. Packages like Sass, which is basically CSS, but it just shows you another way to do it, so you can do it a bit more dynamic and save some CSS values to reuse later, so that you don't have to type the value on each time you want to use it, and then you can just update one variable and it changes everywhere, just to make your CSS development easier. And then jQuery, which is another package for JavaScript, where you can do very complicated JavaScript animations or functions or features with just a few lines of jQuery code, and adding animations like fade ins and fade outs and things that slide around on the screen and user interactions. Basically, if you had to make a snake game in JavaScript, it would take quite a bit more learning and figuring out, and a much larger JavaScript file to try and do that versus jQuery. In the back end, jQuery has that JavaScript, but you don't have to type it. It's already preset and predefined, so that you can just use the shorthand version and make the process of doing the animations, which would in JavaScript be a bit more challenging, to only do it in 1 or 2 lines in jQuery. It's the same thing, but it just speeds up your development process. So yeah, that will be interesting topics to cover. And in chapter 3, we'll start going into frameworks. I think for now, just going to cover Laravel, as it's quite popular at the moment, and building experience into that should help you get into a company if you want to start making a career out of it, or at least help you start your own company if you wanted to. So you can make some pretty fancy websites and keep it very dynamic, and you'll be able to develop it in record time compared to not using a framework. Basically, a framework has everything that I've mentioned previously already built in, and they've got shorthands of all the major essential programming features, so that you don't have to develop it from scratch. And a good framework has those features very dynamic, so they're very easy to use, and they're very versatile in how you want to use it. So it's not set in one way and that's the only way you can use it. But yeah, you'll understand better once we cover that topic. And then also API connections, where we'll be pulling data from an external website or external database. Like, let's just say, for instance, a weather app. if there is a weather app that has a public API, there's actually a lot of free APIs that you can test with, and some are paid for. But yeah, then I'll teach you how to connect to an API and make JSON requests to pull data from the API, so that, like in my previous mentioned example, if there was a weather app and you wanted that weather feature in your own website, you wouldn't have to go and develop it from scratch. You can pull in all that data from the weather app into your website, manipulate it to a way that you see fit, and then choose how to present that to the user. So yeah, then you don't have to develop that feature, and there's APIs for almost anything. Like Google Maps. If you wanted Google Maps in your website, you'd be able to connect to the Google Maps API, pull that into your website, and you'll be able to present your own version of a Google Map, or add your own features to it, where Google Maps on your website can do something that it can't do on someone else's. Or yeah, just if you want to pull in other features, APIs are really good at that. It opens up a lot of doors and possibilities once you get into that field. And yeah, another thing that I'll also be covering in chapter 3 would be AJAX requests, where you can make updates to your database or load pages or content that you have in other HTML files that you would usually have to click on a link to redirect to that, and the page refreshes, and then it loads the new HTML content. But with AJAX, it can load that for you in the background using JavaScript. Well, I'll be using jQuery. And then you can display HTML content or make database requests without the page refreshing. And for a lot of reasons, that is very useful. And in mobile apps, that's also very useful, which is really cool. And yeah, that will be the first 3 major topics that I'll be covering in the programming side of things. And after that, if all goes well, then I'll be going into the electronics aspect. But yeah, one step at a time. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So yeah, my first video after this one will be the basics of HTML and all its tags and content that you can add to a blank web page, and I'll also be showing you how to present that in your browser. See you there.